In just 47 seconds, the most powerful woman in Europe lost the room. Not to a political rival, not to a foreign adversary, but to a journalist with a microphone and a question she could not answer. I was there. I saw it happen. And what I witnessed shook something loose inside me. A feeling I had not felt in years covering Brussels politics. Not shock, not outrage. Something quieter, more unsettling. The growing suspicion that the person steering the European Union through its most turbulent decade has no idea where she is going. Hans-Ulrich Jörges is not a man who speaks carelessly. He has spent decades dissecting German and European politics with surgical precision. When he steps in front of a camera or leans into a microphone, the political establishment listens because his words have a habit of landing exactly where it hurts. So when Jörges looked directly into the camera last week and said what millions of Europeans had been whispering to themselves for months, the silence that followed felt earned. He said Ursula von der Leyen was leading without direction. He said the European Commission, under her stewardship, had become a machine that moved constantly but arrived nowhere. He said the Brussels bureaucracy had perfected the art of looking busy while the continent drifted. And then he asked the question that no mainstream anchor had dared to ask out loud. If she cannot articulate a clear vision for Europe's future, not a slogan, not a framework document, not a carefully translated press release, then what exactly is she doing in that chair? I remember the first time I sat through one of her press conferences. I had a notepad. I had prepared questions. I left with nothing I could use. Every answer arrived wrapped in procedural language so dense it blocked the light. Every commitment came with so many conditions attached that the commitment itself disappeared somewhere in the middle. I told myself this was the nature of the job. Managing 27 governments, 24 languages, 1,000 competing interests pulling in opposite directions simultaneously. I told myself that clarity was the luxury of opposition, not the tool of governance. I gave her the benefit of every doubt I had available to give. But Jörges is done giving benefits. And standing in front of his words now, I find it harder and harder to argue with him. The numbers tell a story her press office cannot spin away. The European economy grew at a rate that would embarrass a developing nation last year. Industrial output across the continent's core economies fell for the fourth consecutive quarter. Energy prices, the issue that every European family understands viscerally, in their bones, in their monthly bills, remain catastrophically high by any historical standard. The green transition, her signature project, the crown jewel of her political legacy, the initiative she staked her second mandate on, is stalling in real time. German auto workers are being laid off by the tens of thousands. French energy companies are openly lobbying for exemptions to policies she personally championed on international stages not 3 years ago. The architecture of her agenda is crumbling from multiple directions at once, and the response from the Parlement is always identical. Another summit, another communiqué, another round of carefully worded optimism dressed up as strategy and released to a press corps that has learned not to expect anything different. Jörges called it what it is. Theater. Expensive, elaborate, consequence-free theater performed for an audience that is slowly, then all at once, stopping to watch. I think about the moment she walked out of the Strasbourg chamber last month. I was watching the feed from a monitoring room in Brussels. A colleague of mine, 20 years in EU correspondence, a man who has seen every variety of institutional crisis the continent can produce, turned to me and said something I have not been able to shake since. He said she was not running from the question. She was running from the answer. Because she did not have one. I did not respond. I did not need to. We both understood perfectly what we were looking at. The criticism Jörges leveled is not ideological. That is the part that makes it so difficult to deflect or dismiss. He is not a right-wing populist demanding the dissolution of European institutions. He is not a Eurosceptic throwing grenades from the comfortable distance of national opposition. He is a mainstream journalist, respected across the political spectrum for decades, who has watched the commission closely enough and long enough to know the precise difference between a leader navigating genuine complexity and a leader hiding behind it. And his verdict, delivered calmly, without theatrical flourish, without performative outrage, was damning. Direction matters, not just in politics, in any institution, any organization, any structure built on collective trust and shared purpose. The moment people sense that the person at the top does not know where they are going, a very specific kind of erosion begins. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with a crisis or a scandal. It seeps in slowly, the way cold comes through a window left open in autumn. People start making their own calculations. Governments start seeking bilateral arrangements that quietly bypass the center. The loyalty that holds multilateral institutions together begins to feel conditional in ways it did not before. The center holds in form, but not in function. And by the time the collapse is visible from the outside, it has long since happened on the inside, quietly and without ceremony. I have covered 3 commission presidents. Each had serious flaws. Each had significant blind spots that their critics cataloged with genuine relish. But each of them at moments of genuine crisis, the kind that strips away the briefing notes and the prepared talking points and the careful media management, could articulate simply, directly, without staff prompting what Europe was trying to do and why it mattered. That clarity, imperfect and politically contested as it sometimes was, provided something essential to the entire operation. It provided a reference point, something real to push against, something concrete enough to organize around, to debate seriously, to reject, or to embrace. Von der Leyen's critics, and Jörges is now among the most prominent and credible of them, argue that reference point has gone missing. That, in its place, is process. Endless, detailed, procedurally impeccable process that points in every direction at once and therefore commits to none. The Commission's defenders will say this is deeply unfair. They will cite legislation passed, agreements signed, funds mobilized, coalitions built under extraordinary political pressure. They will produce timelines and impact assessments and glossy summaries of achievements rendered in careful institutional language. And some of that record is genuinely real. The early pandemic response demonstrated institutional capability that surprised even the deepest skeptics. The initial mobilization around Ukraine showed the Commission could move with unexpected speed when the political will existed. The digital markets framework represented genuine regulatory ambition that other major economies have struggled to match. These are not nothing, they matter, and they deserve honest acknowledgement. But governing is not only about what you have done, it is fundamentally about what people believe you are capable of doing next. It is about the confidence, not manufactured, not messaged, not produced in a communications workshop, but genuinely felt at a gut level that the person holding the wheel is actually looking at the road ahead and knows something about where it leads. And on that question, the honest answer, the one Jörges gave on camera without flinching, is that confidence is eroding, not collapsing, not gone entirely, but eroding steadily and measurably. With every non-answer and every retreating press conference and every summit that produces language instead of outcomes and declarations instead of decisions. I keep coming back to a single exchange I witnessed in a commission briefing room 18 months ago. A journalist, not me, someone from a Southern European outlet covering the energy crisis for an audience that felt it acutely and personally, asked a senior commission official a direct question about energy subsidy targets and what the practical timeline looked like for households in her country. The official spoke for 4 unbroken minutes. I timed it carefully. When she finished, the journalist waited a deliberate beat and said clearly, "I understand that you spoke. Can you answer the question?" The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something undeniably true has been said out loud in a space where truth usually arrives wrapped in so many qualifications it becomes unrecognizable. That moment felt like a preview of what Jörges made explicit and public last week on a much larger stage. The communication has become a substitute for the communication itself. The framework has replaced the underlying thought. The process has eaten the purpose. And somewhere inside that labyrinth of procedures and consultation mechanisms and carefully negotiated language designed to offend nobody and therefore commit to nothing, the direction, if it was ever clearly defined, has become genuinely impossible to locate. I am not ready to write her political obituary. History has seen leaders recover from worse positions than this one. The 30-day political cycle in Brussels is not the same as the 30-year verdict that institutions eventually deliver on those who led them. And the challenges she is genuinely navigating are complex in ways that deserve honest acknowledgement. A fractured geopolitical order without real precedent in the post-war era, a continent still processing the economic shock of multiple overlapping crises hitting simultaneously, a membership whose internal tensions grow more visible and more difficult to manage with every national election cycle that produces a result Brussels did not want and cannot fully absorb. But Jörges asked a question that deserves a real answer, not a framework, not a set of guiding principles, not a reference to ongoing consultation processes or working groups currently in formation or stakeholder dialogues scheduled for next quarter. A real answer given by a real leader who owns the position and the responsibility that comes with it, in plain language that a European citizen paying a heating bill or watching a factory close or simply wondering what the European Union actually does for them in the concrete reality of their daily life can actually understand, evaluate, and respond to as a participant in a democratic process rather than a subject of an administrative one. Until that answer comes, delivered with the clarity and directness that the moment demands, the question hangs in the air over the Berlaymont. Cameras rolling, parliament watching, governments calculating. The room full of people who were told they were part of a project with a direction, looking around now and finding themselves considerably less certain than they were the year before and the year before that. The clock is moving. The direction is not yet clear, and the people asking the questions are no longer willing to mistake motion for progress. This content is fictionalized and presented for analytical and educational purposes.